I should have left when she opened the door in that dark blue sweater. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew from the way her eyes caught mine that nothing about this arrangement was going to stay simple. Clara. My landlady. What do you even call someone who speaks to you like you're a tenant and then looks at you like you're something else entirely? She told me straight when I moved in. No parties. I like quiet. The kind of rule you say once, clipped, without smiling, so the kid renting your upstairs room doesn't mistake kindness for friendship. But she said it while twisting the edge of her sleeve like she wasn't as sure of herself as she wanted me to think. The first weeks, it was all boundaries. Rent in an envelope, quick nods in the hallway. She'd water the plants by the window while I pretended not to watch how careful she was with them, and how careful she wasn't with me, refusing more than a polite word. I told myself I didn't care. But every time I heard her footsteps in the kitchen below, I slowed mine. Just listening. Tonight was different. It was raining, one of those steady September rains that makes everything smell like wet concrete and old leaves. I came downstairs for the mail, barefoot, my shirt clinging from the run back from class. She was at the kitchen table with a glass of wine. Not working, not rushing, just sitting there, staring at nothing in particular. Didn't mean to bother you, I said. She looked up. Her hair wasn't tied back like usual. Loose strands curled along her face, damp from the weather. She gave a half smile, then shook her head. You're not bothering me. You're never loud enough to bother anyone. I should have left right there. But she gestured toward the other chair. Not a word, just a little tilt of her wrist, like she was inviting me into something she hadn't decided on yet. The kitchen was too quiet once I sat. The only sounds, the rain on the roof, the hum of the fridge, her slow sip of wine. I tried to fill the silence. Told her about my professor, about the bus breaking down, about the coffee I spilled on myself. She listened, her chin resting in her hand, eyes fixed on me like she was measuring every word. You talk fast, she finally said. I know, I admitted, laughing a little too quick. Her smile was small, but it stayed longer than it should have. She poured the rest of her glass into mine without asking. Her fingers brushed the rim, lingered just enough that I noticed. I didn't ask why she did it. I didn't ask why her foot tapped lightly under the table, then stilled whenever my eyes darted down. We both pretended it was nothing, but the air between us was charged, like the static before lightning. You know what I said about parties, she murmured, eyes dropping to the table. Yeah, I said, throat dry. No parties. Her gaze flicked back up to mine. Steady, unblinking. Well, maybe just this once. And in that moment, it wasn't the wine, or the rain, or even the way her sweater slipped slightly off her shoulder. It was the way she finally looked at me like she'd let herself break her own rule. The kind of look that makes you forget where you're sitting. The kind that tells you the night isn't going to stay innocent. The wine loosened something, but not enough to make either of us bold. Clara leaned back in her chair, arms crossed like she was pulling herself together after giving too much away. I sat forward, restless, fingers drumming the table until I realized she was watching the nervous rhythm. I tucked my hands under my thighs. You're not from here, are you? She asked. I shook my head. No. Small town. Couple hours north. She nodded, like she already knew. That explains it. Explains what? The way you still believe people mean what they say. Her lips curved, but not quite a smile. I wanted to ask what had made her stop believing. But I didn't. The silence stretched, and she filled it herself. My ex-husband, she said softly, eyes on the window where rain streaked the glass. He was very good at promising things. Not so good at keeping them. I didn't move, barely breathed. She rarely gave more than surface words, and now she was handing me the kind that a stranger shouldn't hear. How long ago? I asked. 8 years, she said. Long enough that I should stop bringing him up. Short enough that I still do. Her laugh was small and self-mocking. She swirled the empty glass, then pushed it aside. And you? She asked. I hesitated. My dating history was shallow compared to hers. A few campus flings, a relationship that ended before it meant much. None of it explained the way I couldn't stop staring at the faint crease at the corner of her mouth, or how my stomach tightened when she leaned closer to hear me over the rain. Nothing serious, I admitted. No one who stuck. Clara's eyes flicked up at me, sharp, searching. I looked down at my hands. Good, she said. Then quickly added, I mean, better not to carry all that weight so young. Her words hung between us. A cover. But her tone betrayed her, softening in a way that told me she'd meant something else. She stood to refill the glasses, brushing past me. Her sweater brushed my arm, light, accidental, but my body lit up as if she'd pressed against me on purpose. She must have felt it, because she froze for a second before continuing to the counter. When she came back, she set my glass down too close, her hand lingering on the stem long enough that her knuckle grazed mine. Neither of us pulled away. Then, just as quick, she drew back, settling into her chair like nothing had happened. I tried to distract myself, but my eyes betrayed me. The way her hair had slipped loose again. The line of her collarbone where her sweater dipped. The faint shadow under her eyes that made her look tired, vulnerable, human in a way I couldn't ignore. People talk, she said suddenly. About what? About everything. About nothing. You know how it is. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. I'm twice your age. More than twice, almost. They'd say I should know better. Her voice caught at that last part, like she was scolding herself. I leaned forward. And what would you say? She didn't answer. Just looked at me, eyes dark and unreadable, and for a moment the space between us shrank until I could feel her breath skim my cheek. My pulse hammered. I was sure she could hear it. Then she pulled back, clearing her throat, straightening her sweater like armor. It's late. You've got class in the morning? She wanted me gone, but her hand stayed flat on the table, inches from mine. I left it there, close enough that if either of us twitched, we'd touch. The rain beat harder on the roof. Neither of us moved. Finally, she whispered, almost too soft to catch. You're not making this easy. And even though she stood to clear the glasses, even though the moment broke, the heat of her hand still lingered next to mine, like we'd touched without ever quite daring to. The next evening, I found her in the same kitchen, a mug of tea this time instead of wine. I hadn't meant to come down. I told myself I only wanted water. But there she was, hair damp from a shower, sweater sleeves pushed up to her elbows. She glanced up when I entered, not startled, not smiling either. Just waiting. You're here a lot, she said, voice even. I live here, I countered, trying for lightness. That earned a small sound, almost a laugh, but it faded as quickly as it came. She looked back at her tea, and I stood there longer than I should have, debating whether to sit. Before I decided, her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't reach for it. The screen lit with a name I didn't recognize. A man's name. I tried not to stare. She noticed anyway. With a tight exhale, she flipped it face down. Just a friend. I nodded, but the silence grew heavier. He calls often? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes snapped up sharp. Jealous already? I swallowed. No. You just, she repeated, softer now, almost amused. But her gaze lingered. Testing. Measuring. I moved closer, pulled out the chair across from her. The scrape of wood on tile sounded too loud. She watched me sit, one eyebrow lifting slightly. You shouldn't be down here, she said. Neither should you, I replied. Her lips parted like she might argue, but instead she leaned back, studying me. The clock on the wall ticked, slow and insistent, filling the silence we both refused to break. Then footsteps. Quick, heavy, coming up the porch steps. We both froze. Clara stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her mug. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her sweater. I pushed my chair back, pulse racing. A knock rattled the door. Clara? You home? The voice was male, older, familiar enough that my gut clenched. She shot me a look, warning, pleading, then went to the door. I sat rigid, listening as she opened it just a crack. "Hey, Tom," she said, voice bright, practiced. I couldn't hear his words clearly, only the tone, casual, comfortable, like someone who dropped by often. A neighbor? A brother? Too close, whoever he was. After a few minutes of light conversation, she closed the door and leaned against it, eyes shut. I hadn't moved. She opened her eyes and saw me watching. Something unspoken passed between us, relief, but also something closer to panic. "That," she said quietly, "is why this is a terrible idea." I wanted to agree. Instead, I stood, crossing the space between us. Too close, close enough to see the faint freckles along her collarbone, the way her breath hitched as I stopped just shy of touching her. "Then tell me to leave," I whispered. Her throat worked as she swallowed. She didn't say it. The air buzzed between us, sharp and electric. My hand lifted, almost without permission, stopping just at her shoulder. I felt the warmth of her skin even through the fabric. She didn't step back. "You're too young," she murmured, but her eyes didn't move from mine. "And you're too scared," I answered, my voice low, trembling. Her lips parted. For one heartbeat, we leaned in, close enough I could feel the heat of her breath on my mouth, taste the faint trace of tea. Then she pulled back, sudden, sharp. Her hand pressed against my chest, holding me at that thin line between permission and refusal. We stood there, breathing hard, either moving away. The front door loomed behind her, the threat of discovery still lingering. But her hand didn't fall. Her body stayed close to mine, tethered by something we couldn't quite sever. And in that pause, her palm flat against me, my hand still hovering near her shoulder, it felt less like we were resisting and more like we were caught, already halfway past the point of return. The night after Tom's visit, I told myself I wouldn't go downstairs. I paced my room instead, headphones on, pretending homework mattered more than the sound of her moving around below. But when I heard the clink of a wine bottle against glass, I gave up the act. She was by the sink when I entered, her back to me, hair tied up but with loose strands curling against her neck. One hand on the counter, the other steadying herself with the glass. "You keep showing up," she said, not turning. "You keep letting me." That made her glance over her shoulder, eyes sharp, then softening as if she wished I hadn't said it. She set the glass down, exhaled, and finally faced me. "Evan," my name in her voice, half warning, half surrender. I moved closer. Not fast, not careless, just enough that the space between us thinned. "You don't want me here?" Her silence answered before her lips did. "I don't know what I want." Something cracked open then, not in her voice, but in her face, the way her guard faltered. I lifted a hand slowly, giving her time to stop me. She didn't. My fingers brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, tucking it behind her ear. She inhaled sharply, eyes closing for just a beat too long. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "Say it like you mean it," I murmured, leaning closer. My words grazed her skin more than her ears. Her breath caught. "You think this is simple. That wanting makes it okay. But it doesn't." "I don't think it's simple," I said. "I just think pretending we don't feel it is worse." Her laugh broke out then, sharp and low, shaking her head. "You're too young to sound that certain." I stepped even closer, her back nearly against the counter now. "Then tell me what's making you so uncertain." Her hand lifted, almost like she'd pushed me away. But instead, her palm pressed lightly against my chest again, not shoving, just resting there. I could feel her trembling through the contact. "This," she said, voice unsteady, "this would ruin everything. Or start something," I answered. The kitchen was quiet but for our breaths. Her eyes darted to my lips, then away, then back again, as if she couldn't stop herself. I leaned forward, so close the edge of my mouth brushed her temple when I spoke. "Tell me to go upstairs." She didn't. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, so her cheek brushed mine. A slip, a surrender, a mistake, I couldn't tell which. I can't stop thinking about you, I whispered. That froze her. Her hand on my chest curled into my shirt, gripping it like she needed to steady herself. Don't say that, she breathed. Why not? Because if you say it out loud, then it's real. Her voice cracked. I swallowed hard, heart hammering against her hand. My other arm rose almost of its own accord, bracing against the counter beside her, caging us both in. Clara! The way she looked at me then, tired, afraid, hungry, it undid every barrier we'd been pretending to hold. She leaned in, barely, her lips brushing the air between us. I closed the gap a fraction, just enough to feel the warmth of her breath against mine. And then, her phone buzzed again, loud in the silence. She flinched, pulling back just an inch, but her hand still clutched my shirt. We both froze, caught between the pull of the moment and the sound dragging us out of it. Her eyes locked on mine, wide, unguarded. If we cross this line, she whispered, we can't go back. And for the first time, either of us moved away. I thought the moment had died when her phone buzzed. She'd pulled back, eyes wide, and I'd stepped away before I did something we couldn't undo. But she didn't answer the call. She just silenced it, set the phone face down, and braced both hands on the counter like she needed to hold the room still. I lingered in the doorway, heart pounding. You don't have to explain, I said quietly. Yes, I do, she whispered, almost to herself. She didn't look at me when she added, that call wasn't from a friend. It was from my son. The word hit me harder than I expected. Son. I blinked, trying to connect the careful woman in front of me with the idea of a college-age kid who might not be much younger than me. He's 23, she said, finally meeting my eyes. Older than you, barely. He doesn't live here anymore, but he checks in. He worries about me. I swallowed hard. My tongue felt thick. Does he know about us? There is no us. She snapped too fast, then immediately closed her eyes like she regretted the words. Not yet, she added, softer, almost broken. The room tilted. Suddenly it wasn't just neighbors or gossip we risked. It was her son finding out, people judging her not just for an age gap, but for crossing some invisible line no one would forgive. I stepped closer, too close, because distance felt unbearable. She flinched back against the counter, but she didn't move away. Her hands gripped the edge so tightly her knuckles went pale. You think I don't lie awake at night? She said, voice trembling. You think I don't ask myself what I'd lose if anyone found out? What he'd say about me if he knew? Her chest rose and fell fast. I could feel the heat of her breath between us. I don't care what anyone thinks, I said. Not him, not anyone. You should, she whispered. But I don't. My hand hovered near her arm, not daring to touch. I only care if you push me away. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes dropped to my mouth, then away, then back again. The struggle was written across every line of her face. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Her voice was so small it nearly broke me. I reached out, finally, brushing her sleeve with the back of my hand. Even that light contact made her inhale sharply, her grip on the counter faltering. Neither do I whispered. But I can't stop. Her body trembled, not fear, not exactly. Something closer to surrender fighting against itself. She shifted past me, brushing too close, her shoulder grazing mine as she moved toward the table. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, soft and warm, and my whole body went tight. She turned back, arms folded like armor. If we do this, Evan, if we really do this, it's not just a mistake. It changes everything. For me. For him. The way she said him, her son, carried a weight I couldn't ignore. But beneath it was something else, a confession that she wanted this as badly as I did, that the only thing holding her back was the world outside this kitchen. Then let it change, I said, stepping toward her again. My hand reached up, almost instinct, and brushed her hair back from her face. She didn't pull away. Her eyes closed at the touch, her lips parting like a word had almost slipped out. When she opened them again, they glistened. "You'll ruin me," she whispered. "Or save you," I answered, my voice low against her ear. She shivered, a full-body tremor she tried to disguise by stepping sideways, by putting the table between us. But it was too late. The line we hadn't crossed was thinning, stretching, trembling beneath our weight. Finally, she exhaled, ragged and resigned. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "If you still want this by then." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The decision hung in the air, heavy and inevitable, leaving me raw with the knowledge that by morning, nothing between us would ever be the same. I didn't sleep. The hours bled into each other, restless and thick, until morning light cut through the blinds and made the decision harder to avoid. By the time I heard her downstairs, the quiet rattle of dishes, the kettle humming, I knew waiting wouldn't change anything. I found her at the counter, pouring hot water over tea leaves. She didn't look up when I entered. "You're early," she said. "I couldn't wait." Her hands trembled slightly as she set the kettle down. She tried to hide it by fussing with the cup, but I saw. "I told you," she said, still not looking at me. "If you came back." "I did," I cut in. "I'm here." Finally, she turned. Her face was pale, eyes shadowed, like she hadn't slept either. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the low hiss of steam fading into silence. Then she stepped closer. Not much, just enough that the air shifted. "You don't understand what this will mean," she whispered. "I understand enough." Her arms folded across her chest like she wanted to hold herself together, but the movement only drew my eyes to the curve of her shoulder, the tension in her neck. I moved in, slow, careful, until my body heat brushed hers. "Clara," I said, softer than I meant to. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away, then back. She exhaled hard, a shudder running through her, as if she'd finally stopped holding her breath. "You should walk away," she whispered. "Do you want me to?" Her silence answered. She couldn't say it. Her throat worked, her hands tightening against her arms until, finally, she dropped them. I reached out, fingers brushing her cheek, tucking another loose strand of hair behind her ear. She leaned into it, not much, but enough. Her eyes fluttered closed for half a second before opening again, and when they did, something had broken. She stepped into me. Not a kiss, not yet. Just the press of her body against mine, tentative, trembling, like she'd been holding herself back for so long that the smallest surrender felt like falling. "I can't keep pretending," she breathed against my collarbone. "Then don't." My voice cracked. Her hands rose, tentative, gripping the fabric at my shoulders. I bent slowly, my lips brushing so close to hers I could feel her inhale. For a heartbeat we stayed there, almost, not yet, the air thick and unbearable. Then she whispered, "Please!" Not a plea for me to stop. A plea to let it happen. And I did. Our mouths met, hesitant at first, then sure, raw with all the nights of silence and almosts. Her hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me there, while my arms circled her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left to deny what we'd both known. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, teeth grazing, breaths uneven, the clumsy hunger of two people breaking their own rules. But it was real. When we finally broke apart, her forehead rested against mine. Her eyes searched mine, searching for regret. All I gave her was truth. "Now you know," I said, breathless. Her smile was small, shaky, but real. "Now we both do." The air shifted again, lighter this time, as if the weight we'd carried had finally cracked. Nothing outside that kitchen had changed. The world would still judge, her son would still call, fear would still linger. But in that moment, there was clarity. We weren't pretending anymore. Morning light spilled through the kitchen window, softer than the night before, and yet everything between us felt sharper, clearer. Clara sat across from me at the table, her tea untouched, her sweater sleeves pulled over her hands like she needed something to hold on to. Neither of us spoke at first. Words felt too heavy, too dangerous. But silence wasn't safer anymore. "You're staring," she said finally, her voice low, almost playful, though her eyes stayed fixed on her cup. I've been staring since the first week I moved in, I admitted. That pulled her eyes up. For once, she didn't hide. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. Her hand trembled as it reached across the table. I caught it before she could pull back, threading my fingers through hers. Her skin was cool, but her grip tightened like she was afraid I might let go first. I've told myself for years I didn't need anyone, she said. That it was safer that way. But you… She broke off, shaking her head, a laugh catching in her throat. You've made a liar out of me. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead lightly to hers across the table. She closed her eyes, and for a moment we just breathed together, slow and steady, like two people finally finding the same rhythm. What about your son? I asked quietly. Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. That's tomorrow's problem. Tonight I just want… She trailed off, but her other hand found my wrist, holding me steady. We stayed like that until she pulled her chair closer, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. The contact was small, ordinary, but it grounded us. It was the kind of touch you don't make if you're planning to let someone go. Do you regret it? She asked, voice almost too soft to hear. I shook my head. Not for a second. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh of relief. She shifted, resting her head lightly against my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, tentative at first, then firmer when she melted into me. The world outside still waited, the whispers, the judgment, the phone calls. But in that kitchen, with her hand clasped in mine and her breath warm against my neck, none of it mattered. You make me feel seen again, she murmured, barely more than a breath. My throat tightened, but I managed to whisper back. Then let me keep doing that. We didn't need anything more, not words, not promises, not declarations. Just her weight leaning into me, the steady beat of her pulse against my chest, and the quiet certainty that, for the first time in years, she'd chosen not to be alone. And I wasn't going anywhere.